Okay, I'm just going to go on here. You can stay on the line for just a second. I'm going to go through some of the screens that Carolyn was talking about. Since this is a Church Windows presentation, we would be remiss in not showing you some screens. So this is the one that Carolyn was speaking about that takes contributions from the contribution side over into accounting. This is the new accounting screen. She mentioned the word financial several times, and that was our old program. Some people still using financial, but accounting is the new rewritten module, and we have some additional safeguards, I think, in place now in accounting that are really great. So the next screen, so this shows actually, the contribution accounts, what was given to, and then over here in the fours and ones, the assets and the income accounts, which accounts were posted to. So this acts as a check and balance to make sure that what people gave, the contribution credit, is the same amount that went into the bank. So anyone looking at the deposit tickets should be able to identify whether all the money is there. In this case, it's just $750 in our little example. The next screen I want to show is the new Audit Trail in our Browse Transaction screen. So you can see all the activity that was conducted and the different types, contribution, bills, and payments. And then over here there's a column for date posted and the time, and then user, and that's by login. So our new login actually asks you to identify a person. In this case, I think you can see, I'm going to try to use my little drawing tool here, but you can see here Bob and Sally right down here on this column. So you can see that they used the system and when they used it, which is really helpful, and then also the time and what types of transactions that they conducted. So, if Bob's not supposed to be in the contributions and he's in there, you can tell a lot from looking at the Browse Transaction report or the screen in your Church Windows. And I just mentioned bank reconciliations as well. It's essential that they're being done in the system. Many of the technicians receive calls all the time and people say they're out on their bank reconciliation, and so we start to help them, or we say, pull up the bank reconciliation, and people say, oh, I'm not doing it on the system. And it's like, well, how can you be sure that your books are correct if you're not using our bank reconciliation? So sometimes some really enlightening things come out about that. As far as lessons learned here, what Carolyn was relating in her stories, I think we can all see how technology can help us with our checks and balances. You can use the system the way it was intended, which is that the contributions would equal the amount going into the bank, plus any enter income, any additional income like rentals and such that you would enter. The division of responsibilities, that is just key, and we have heard this over and over from James earlier and Mary Lee as well. One person can't be doing it all, or you're just asking for trouble, basically. And your internal controls, again. I think if there's something that you're going to come out of here with, it's going to be the internal controls. So is there anything else that you have, Carolyn, that you want to add?
Nope, that's it.
Okay, thanks so much. Thanks for taking time out of support calls. I know that really breaks your heart.
Yes, it does.
Okay, talk to you later.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Okay, like any good presentation, sometimes there's pop quizzes. So what I'm going to do is ask you a question, and you all can log in on your keyboards and make one of the choices here. I'm going to launch our poll. My poll says, which of the following is not a legal element of fraud? And I've got 60% voting. Looks like we've got 72 now. And let's see if we can show you. And the correct answer is D. All of the above are legal elements of fraud, and just about everyone chose that. So a material false statement, that's basically lying, so you're making up something. And we're going to go on and move on to Maureen. Maureen, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thanks.
Okay. I'd just like to share a story of something that I experienced at my own church this past winter. We have 3 fundraisers at our church. In November, we have a craft fair. In January, we have a spaghetti dinner. And in February, we have a yard sale. And my husband and I are in charge of the craft fair. And when it's finished, Saturday at like 2 o'clock, my husband and I, the president of the church council, and 2 other gentlemen went into the back room, and we counted all the cash. We had a tally sheet, so we had exactly how much money came in and so forth. So there were quite a few of us in the room when that was done. I noticed, however, at the spaghetti dinner, when the I can't say spaghetti today, spaghetti dinner was finished, our two co-chairs, who happened to be husband and wife, took the cash and the checks and so forth, went into the back room, and proceeded to count the money. And several of us walked past the door and basically said, would you like some help? We'll help you. Oh, no, 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 we're doing it. And we let it go. And later, several of us were saying, that's not a very good idea. Not that we would ever mistrust these two, but from what we've heard today, of course, that can happen. So basically, we started looking into our policies and procedures as to how it should happen. Because for one thing, we wanted to protect them. We didn't want them to be under suspicion that they might stick any of that money in their pockets. I believe I know why they wanted to do it, because on Sunday morning after we have a fundraiser, there's always an announcement during an announcement time, and it's always, drum roll, how much money did we make in the spaghetti dinner, and it's always a big surprise. So I think they basically didn't want to ruin the surprise. But it has caused us to kind of rethink how these things are done, and the more I thought about it, I realized that I probably wasn't doing things well either. Because during the craft show, we would set up Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday for the craft fair, and throughout that week, members were allowed to come in and buy something early. And somebody would come in and say, I'd like to buy these two pictures, here's $20, and they would hand it to me, and I would put it in my little envelope and put it away. Well, there really wasn't any accounting for that money that I took in ahead of time. So there again, I rethought myself, how should I have done it better? And I'd like maybe some suggestions from you, Mary Lou, or from somebody else about what's a good way to protect myself, because somebody could have said, well, she took that money and took it home. It's hers. So I kind of wouldn't mind some suggestions here.
Excellent. That's great. And I neglected to introduce you. I'm so sorry. I was so busy trying to manage my poll, and I haven't done that before. So I don't even know if everybody got to see the results on the screen. Did you?
Yes, we did. I did.
Okay, good. And so I forgot to introduce Maureen is one of the principals in the company. And how long have you been with Church Windows, Maureen?
1986.
Wow. Just about since the beginning of the company, right?
Since the beginning, yes.
Yes. Well, we're glad to have you, and glad to have you relate your real-life stories. It's much more interesting, I think, for people when they can relate to what happens in a church. Some of you may have other ideas. You can just type them in there. I am getting something from Chuck. Thank you so much, Chuck, for sending me the reminder about Richard Hammer. One of the people that I often refer people to when they have questions like this is an individual that's involved with NACBA. That's the National Association of Church Business Administrators, and of which I'm a member. And Richard Hammer is an attorney and a CPA, and he produces, I believe it's called Church and Clergy Tax Guide. Not easy to say, but that comes out, I'm not sure how often, maybe once a year, and that answers a lot of questions on financial matters. And being both an attorney and a CPA, he can speak to a lot of the issues that we face. And he does weigh in on a lot of these kinds of questions. I think the main thing here is to have more than one person verifying the cash that you receive. So perhaps a system of having a register where somebody, signs that they purchased whatever they purchased at your garage sale or rummage sale, and, they bought a coat for $10 or whatever they purchased, something to verify how much cash that you should have so that you can prove basically how much cash you should have received.
Right, and I see a good suggestion from Mary Lee here. She suggested that I write a cash receipt for any cash that I received, and the buyer keeps a copy and I have a carbon, and that way when somebody hands me that $20, I just scratch out, $20 here, here's your copy, I have a copy, and I really like that idea because that means there's paper on both sides.
I like that idea as well. Thanks, Mary Lee, for that. recommendation. And it's not hard to do. Remember, in the old days, that's the way we used to do everything. Cash receipts, we used to write it down on the carbon, but it still has a purpose. And sometimes I think even in the church office, when we receive money in, there should be one of those little books that you give to the individual that gave you the cash, whether it's for reimbursement of Sunday school materials or paying for a retreat or something like that. A lot of that kind of money is cash, and it can go missing really easily with no checks and balances. So excellent, excellent story. I'm just going to move on our lessons learned here. And
I have one more thing here,
sure.
Mary Lou. Carolyn is just suggesting if you have a master list of items with a column of amount charged and place the check paid, like in the school fundraiser. So you actually have a ledger then. Here's the item, here's the check, and here's how much was paid for it. So it's sort of the same idea of getting it in writing.
And we do have another comment from one of the participants. It says, it's our church policy to not allow family members to count the money together. So I think we all
That's
agree.
a good idea.
That is a really good idea. So two people in the back, or even worse, oh, yes, our married couple takes the money home and counts it. A lot of privacy there. So,
okay.
Yeah, kind of a potential waiting to happen.
Yes.
Great. Well, thanks so much for telling your story.
You're welcome.
One of the lessons learned here, we've got often the embezzlers are trusted long-term employees or volunteers, and that is often the case in churches. We have the affinity fraud thing going on where people trust each other because they've known them or they've known their family has been in the church for years, and so often this is an excuse for overlooking, doing background checks and that kind of thing that we've talked about earlier with some of our stories. Oftentimes we find that the fraud starts with a small amount with the full intention of paying the money back. And the reason for the crime is very honorable, like Mary Lee mentioned in her stories as well. You have a sick child, or the spouse lost their job, somebody was in an accident, and you need a lot of medical funds. And again, back to the theories of fraud, when you have something, a financial situation, perhaps a spouse does lose a job and you're too embarrassed to share it with the church community, which should be the first place that you would feel welcome to share. But unfortunately, sometimes people don't, and they just want to, get the money somehow, and they really can't tell anybody about it. And so that's part of the reason why they embezzle. So it's often really too bad that that happens. Any other questions from the floor at this point of all of our stories that we've gone over?